All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Just to confirm, can you guys still see my slides and hear me? Awesome. Thank you very much. Can you also just ask those that will be joining to meet themselves? I know there's still a lot of you that are still joining. You're only 15 in the meeting, and we're expecting more than that. But because of time, I'm gonna proceed with the lecture, and then of course, those that will be joining us a bit later will just catch up, and then we'll proceed. Also, do note that this will be a two-section lecture. Section 1 will be from now until 8:30, and then the second one will be at 11:25 up until 12:10. And as Prof. Kana always starts his lecturers, I also promote conversation. So if you guys need clarity with any of the concepts that I'll be discussing with you, please feel free to pause me and then I can explain those concepts. However, we cannot be over discuss certain concepts because of time constraints. And then, of course, if you still need clarity on other things, you can put them in the chat box. And then if we do get time at the end of our sessions, we can then go through those in detail so that you do not lose the actual lecture time. All right. Hope that is clear. All right. I'm gonna be quite quick, and then there's more to this particular concept of beer making. So I'm a guest lecturer. I'm based at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in Westville campus, and then I'll be giving you guys a brief overview of beer making. And then this is a very lengthy process, and it's very complex. However, I'm gonna try and simplify it as much as possible. And then, as I said in your announcements, this concept can be used in your assessments during your test or your examination, so please pay attention to that. And then, as I said, if you do need clarity on any other concept, you can stop me and then we can discuss those. All right, so this is the overview of the entire process. This is literally a very lengthy one, as I say. However, we do not just do it, but then there's a purpose, and then there's different beer styles, there's different flavors, there's different components that we add into the beer, which result into how the beer tastes and also how it smells and all that. And of course, we will be going in details about some of those particular concepts. And some of you, as you are doing an exit module, I believe all of you guys are doing your third years and will be completing your degrees by the end of this year. You might find yourself in a brewery next year. You might find yourself at SAB or any other microbial processing company, which will require you to follow SOPs or processes in detail. And most importantly, not to make mistakes. And of course, this is an overview. And when you get to the industry, they'll further train you, but you should be having at least the background of how the process works. So the bottom right corner, we've got different colors of beers. All those are beers. Yes, some might be looking like a juice or a Coke or whatsoever that you may relate it to. But most importantly, you must understand that there's different beer styles that are prepared a bit differently. And is literally one component of this process that can result into the beer tasting in a different manner. So here, if you can check, we've got a preparation of malt, and then the wort boiling, fermentation, filtration, and then bottling. All these different processes you guys need to understand by the end of today, up until you've got a beer in a bottle, right? Okay, so moving further. So this will be the contents. I'm gonna give the brief introduction. I'll give you guys the importance of the raw materials, the wort production. I'll explain what wort is, and then fermentation, which I believe some of you, or not some of you, all of you, have gone through what fermentation is with Prof. Kana, so that should be much quicker and clearer with most of you. And then most importantly, maturation, what we mature beer in, how should it be for it to be mature, and again, how long does it take for beer to be mature before it can be consumed? All right, so there's a classical flow of what fermentation is. You do have glucose, which is your sugar source, and then which can be converted to pyruvate or other constituents. And then based on the different microorganisms that you can use on the different subunits of glucose, you can get different bioproducts. And today we are discussing ethanol and carbon dioxide as the products of fermentation by Saccharomyces, and here we are making beer. However, there could be other processes where we are still doing the same, but then making wine. So with wine, it is a bit different, and both processes are utilizing raw plant materials. However, with wine, it takes much longer to mature based on what you want the wine to taste like, and also the type of wine that you're also making. Okay, so this is the brewing process. We do have the malt, milling, mashing, Lutherton, and brewing. All these different processes happens in different vessels. We do then have the cooling, which needs to be the process that cools the beer or the wort from brewing, and then fermentation in fermentation vessels. Then this will go into maturation and eventually bottling and packaging. All right, again, I'm not going to be bothering with different steps as you're going to be going through each and every one of those. However, do understand that under malting, there's multiple processes that takes place, and then milling is simply just grinding of the grains into the yeast. The yeast is just the powdered portion of the grains, which will then be utilized in the fermentation process. All right. So historically, Babylonians first brew are the first brewers of beer, and then they call it Emma. So this shows you how old beer making has been. And of course, the Egyptians later improved the brewing process by introducing malting. Malting, which is the utilization of the grains, the malt, which they allowed to grow for a certain period of time and then killed the germination process, and then later used the grains as dry as they are. We'll also get to the process of how to make this malt. And then in the 9th century, hops were used as the preservatives and later led into the inclusion in the brewing. The hops are the small seeds from a plant, which can also help in the taste and the aroma of the beer. And then the malts from the Europe used soon led to the commercialization of the inclusion in beer. Okay. So this all happened in the past. And of course, now we are buying beer from the shops in different styles. And also, as I said, with the hops, these are the plant material that are adding the taste and the aroma, but initially they were used as preservatives in the beer. All right, and then of course, in the 11th century, brewing began with the ale as the main beer brewed. And as I said, remember the different styles of beer. There's lager, there's ale, and also there's different non-alcoholic beer that we are seeing that are being produced today. We're not going to get into the 0% alcohol, but we're going to be discussing how the two different beers, ale and lager, are produced. Okay. And then the brewing, it is the process of making beer, which is simply means boiling. However, what you are boiling needs to be defined before you boil it, and also how you boil it, with what do you boil it, is very important when you're making beer. And then, of course, because people were getting interested in beer making, also starting to make money from beer, in 1516, they then passed a law of using barley, water, and the hops as the main ingredients in beer making. Why water is so important? This is because you cannot just use any type of water. You need to prepare your water before you start using it in the beer making. And also with the hops can be plant material from any plant, but then there are specific ones that you can utilize, which cannot be exerting different components that can also be toxic to those that will be consuming the beer. And of course, the barley, these are the raw materials that you use in your beer making. And of course, due to research developments, we've seen people use different plant materials besides barley to make beer. And remember, what they get from these plant materials is just the starch or the sugar materials that the yeast requires for it to ferment. Right. So please remember that. And then most importantly, the yeast that is utilized needs to be specific, it needs to be pure. And again, you can also work on developing your own strain of yeast, but most importantly, it should be defined initially that you are making either lager or ale as an initial step of your brewing process. All right. As I said, this is a very lengthy process. This is a scheme that we follow in the laboratory when you're making beer. Firstly is the malting. We'll get to that. Secondly, we've got mashing, which happens in a mash tun. And then thirdly, we've got brewing or boiling that happen in a kettle. And this has changed over time. And then now we've got a one system that does all these processes in one. However, you must understand what differs mostly is the temperature that you apply and also the things that you add, including the hops. As you can see that after mashing, you will be adding the hops into the kettle. And then the boiling, we all know that boiling takes place at higher temperatures. So whatever that we have inside the kettle, which will be the wort, needs to boil at that particular stage after adding the hops. All right. And then we have fermentation. And as I said, you guys know what fermentation is. And of course, this happens in a different vessel as compared to the kettle. And from the kettle, it goes into the heat exchanger. This comes out as hot as your boiling water, needs to be cooled, and yeast needs to be added into a fermentation vessel that does not have high temperatures for it to be toxic or lethal to the yeast that you'll be using. And lastly, the maturation that happens in the kegs or the bottles that you buy from the stores. All right. So there are four main steps that you apply in beer making. Firstly is malting, and malting includes soaking, germination of the seeds or the grains, and then instant drying and milling. The drying part happens at a very high temperature. Remember, these are seeds. When you are soaking them, you are initiating the growth of these particular seeds. And then as they start germinating, they want to start changing shape and then growing. And then as they are doing that, you then have to stop the process by heating them at high temperatures. And that process is called kilning. All right. And then after the kilning process is taking place, you will then take those grains through the roller, which is milling, and then you're just making them into a finer powder. All right. And then the second step is mashing. And mashing happens when you take the yeast, which is the crushed malt, into the water, and the water needs to go up to 68 degrees. And at that particular stage, you are now extracting different components from this malt. So this is the extraction of malted barley nutrients, and then the fermentable sugars that will be harvested from this particular malt, amino acids, and then the carbon-rich compounds by using water and heat extracting malted barley with hops. All right. So the hops part will be added, as I said, when you are boiling your malt. And then, of course, fermentation, which requires you to cool the wort, and then the extra that you got from mashing will then be put into the vessel, and then you add your yeast for it to ferment your wort. And then lastly, maturation, which is the fermented beverages in the clarified and then dispense. So with maturation, you're literally taking what we call a green beer, you put it into a sealed container with your yeast so that you can continue fermenting the remaining sugars without any further disruptions of your fermentation process. And once you are done with that, you need to clarify your beer by removing all the viable cells, and then later bottle it, or you can keg it for it to continue carbonation. And then, of course, this is our brewery system in the Westville campus. We've got a miller on the left, which is the one that breaks the malt into the seeds that they are, and then it will be released as powder. And then you've got the machine 10. The machine 10 has a rotor that turns around as it is boiling. At 68 degrees, there is that stirring that takes place. And then on A, there's our control unit that controls the temperatures in these different vessels. And of course, the different speed of turning in the mesh. And then you've got the luter 10. In B, the luter 10 removes the spent grains and then releasing your wort. And then this is your kettle where you're gonna be boiling your wort. And then once you're done with the boiling, you'll then transfer it into the fermentation vessel. Please take note of the difference of these particular vessels. And on top of the fermentation vessel, you've got what you call the S-tube or the S-trap that allows only gas to go out. And then it does not allow anything to go in, which is a component of maintaining sterility. All right. So this is what I just explained for you guys. In this particular slide, what is important is that we've got the miller in place that you guys need to pay attention to. I don't have clear pictures of that. Maybe in our second session, I can provide clear pictures of how that looks like. And then, of course, 1 to 5, I just explained the purposes of those. That in the machine 10, you do have those buffers that are within the vessel that are continuously turning. And what is important to also notice, I believe you guys did the bioreactor components. This serves as vessels of reactors. If you can look closely, there are silver bands and also a red band there, also silver bands there. Those are heating belts, and the heating belts act as a temperature control equipment, which you control on this white. You need to control those temperatures. And of course, they heat up. As they heat up, the liquid that is being turned inside the vessel will also eventually start adjusting to the high temperatures that you are setting. And then there is a thermometer, there's different probes. If you can see on the right side of unit 3, there is that particular probe that measures the temperature and the ORP within the vessel. Right, and then I did explain what the S-tube is for, which is the gas vent that releases the gas and also indicates that fermentation is taking place, as you can observe the bubbles coming out during fermentation. All right, so the first two processes, which is malting and meshing, they together produce a medium called wort. As I explained to you that you will be making wort, and then the wort is the primary raw material that you make as a processor to make beer. And this is from the malted barley. I also did mention in the past that currently there's different researches under beer making, and they are using different plant products. Some are using rice, some are using corn, some are using even your fruit extract as a source of sugar for your yeast to produce beer. And that's why we've got different beers tasting in a different manner. So brewing is a complex fermentation process. Of course, it requires a specific flavor, a specific aroma, which is the smell, clarity, how clear it is, the color that your beer will end up as, the form stability, and then, of course, the percentage of alcohol that you want to be having in your beer.
Diana wore the a polo match in 1981 during her courtship with then Prince Charles.
Okay,
The Sweta fetched a total of 44 bids at an auction by Sotheby's. The auction house's Cynthia Houghton say the Sweta carries the whispers of Princess Diana's.
All right, apologies about that. I guess we've got a visitor that is having their other things playing on the side. Right, as we are saying, your beer needs to be infused with a particular flavor that you want, the aroma, which is the smell, and it also needs to be clear. Clarity also comes with the desirability of your beer. If it's too cloudy, some people might not want to drink it, and if it's clear, more like goldish, they can also be attracted to that. The color, the foam stability, if you pour it into the glass, that foam can also serve as an attractive kind of measure to your consumers. And then most importantly, the percentage of alcohol, which you also need to note. Alcohol percentage in beer is different from wine and also whiskey and other different alcoholic beverages. We'll get to that in your second session. So all those are factors associated with the finished product of the beer, and how you get to that is mainly on how you prepare your beer. Right. So we went through this particular slide initially, and right now I just explained to you how you get through that, which is the malting process. And I'm just gonna once again get into more details with that. Okay, so this should be in the notes that I provided. And as I said, it is a very complex and lengthy process. However, if you do follow this particular presentation, you will be able to understand the process on the periphery. I also provided videos for you to watch at the later stage that you can definitely get more explanation of what we are discussing. Right, so that was the introduction. So now we're gonna get to the raw materials that you require in beer making. Just to check, can you guys still hear me? Thank you very much. Right, we want to talk about the raw materials. So we've got 4 main ingredients in beer making. Firstly is the barley malt. So this is what you get the malt as. And of course, these are commercially available after they've germinated and also went through the process of kilning. And then you've got the hops. Let's just have somebody answer. What does this look like? Where do you know this from? Anyone?
Hansa Pilsner.
Hansa Pilsner, there you go. So SAB adopted this particular plant material, which is hops, in their logo to generate a perception to people that this beer is made out of the hops, right? So Hansa Pilsner, if you can go to the brewery tomorrow, you can just go check the labeling on that particular beer. It has that particular grain of hops on their packaging. And of course, you've got the yeast that you need to prepare, and it must be pure. And one strain on particular beer preparations. You've got the top and the bottom fermenting Saccharomyces cerevisiae that we can utilize when you're making ale and when you're making lager, respectively. And of course, most importantly, the water. You need to use pure, clean water, which you preferably need to boil before utilizing, so that you can kill or remove all the other contaminants in your water before utilizing it. So that's why we've got water as a very important ingredient in this particular process. Right, starting off with the first stage, which is the malting. So malt is the cereal or the barley that germinated to degrade the endosperm, which is the covering of the grains. And of course, this is done by the enzymes during the germination. And then this malting process takes place around about for 2 days. And then firstly, the collection of stock of suitable barley. You choose the type of barley. There's different barley. There's different strains or types of the barley, which are grown in different areas of the country, or even the seeds that you utilize to grow this particular barley. You can also decide based on that. They also do have different flavors, different sugar contents, and again, it is very important to choose a specific one for your type of beer. And then the storage of the cereal until it is required. And as I said, you buy this from the shop after the malting process has already taken place. So in the shops, you're gonna be getting it in bags, and this is how it looks like when you open the bags, and then the sipping of the grain in water. So this is what I was talking about, that you can put this in water to allow it to germinate for a particular time. And then that takes around about 4 to 5 days. It differs also with the different enzymes that you're gonna be producing during the malting process. And then up to 5 days, that's how far you can go, because after 5 days, then you're gonna start getting the sprouting, which is the initial stage of a seed germinating into a plant, and we do not need that particular stage. So around about 2 days is enough for the malting process to take place. And after that, you have to put this into a heating furnace around about 50 to 80 degrees. And then this is called kilning. Once you are at 80 degrees for a few minutes, you will be stopping all the enzymatic processes that are taking place in your seeds or the grains. And of course, this providing optimal environment within the grain for the synthesis of hydrolytic enzymes. And as I said, this is a natural enzymatic process that takes place as though the plant is growing from a seed. All right. Enzymes hydrolyze the cell wall and the reserve proteins of the endosperm. And the term modification means the alteration of the structure of the cereal. Please remember this: modification, it is the change of shape or the alteration of the structure of the cereal, which is this particular seed, into what you can utilize, right? And remember, as I said, you can use different plant products. Corn can be utilized, and other rice can also be utilized in beer making, but for this one, we'll be focusing on barley malt in particular. All right, so there's different enzymes, as I said, that can be released. So the cell wall polysaccharides that will also be releasing from that, and then the reserve proteins, starch granules that will be contained within the malt, and then the index of modification is used to quantify protein solubilization. Solubilization will also help you at the later stage when you're starting to mesh that your proteins and your other contents of the malt are soluble in the water that you're gonna be putting them in. And then the well-modified malt has all the cell wall eliminated and degraded to oligosaccharides of low molecular weight. And the reason why you need this at the low molecular weight is so that they can be readily available for your yeast to start utilizing for their growth, and also to generate or to produce alcohol. All right. And then you've got what you call adjuncts, and these are the non-malted carbohydrates. These are the supplements that you can add into your beer or to your wort preparation, and this provide extract at lower cost than the available sugars from the malt. And these are commonly sourced from corn, beet, cane, or rice, as I mentioned. And then starch from the adjuncts is degraded by boiling to make them susceptible to enzyme attack. Remember, the first part is enzymatically done, and then it's facilitated by enzymes to be converted from one form to another. And then, of course, the hops, these are the dried blossoms of the female hop plant, and these are used to impart a bitter taste to beer. If you can taste beer, some people do not like beer because of the bitter taste. However, that bitter taste is very, very important in beer making. You cannot have beer that is not bitter. Yes, sure, you can have sweet beer, you can have pineapple tasting beer or banana tasting beer. It's up to you, but then the bitterness in the beer is vital, and that's the reason why we add the hops. And then at the later stage, you can then add your own flavorants to make your flying fish, or to make your Amstel, to make your Heineken. All those are different flavors that you can also just induce after the fermentation has taken place. And then the hops provide an aroma and flavor, and also the hop character. And as I said, you cannot have beer without the hop character. That is the bitterness that you can feel on your tongue. Even though the beer is sweet, there should still be that tingling taste on your tongue when you're tasting beer. All right, they also contribute to flavor stability and form retention. So these are other contributing factors of having hops in your beer. Please remember this, they might just be in your test. And then the bittering process, this is the alpha acid present in the hops, which are converted during the kettle boil. Remember the boiling process. And then this also takes place after you've added your hops, right? And then this is transferred into the more soluble alpha iso acids. And of course, this accounts for most of the bitterness in the beer, right? And most importantly, as I said, the water. This is a major factor in determining the beer quality. Groundwater was initially used as a standard for consistency in beer production. Why they say groundwater? Normally, groundwater comes out of the ground as pure as it is, as compared to the processed water. The processed water, you need to be adding the chlorination. It goes through different processes, which can affect the quality of the water. And of course, because we cannot be running after streams and ponds, right now we've got contamination of groundwater, which is why we cannot use our current generation's groundwater. However, we can prepare the water through boiling. As I said, it is a very important stage or step in preparing for your beer making. All right, so this was stopped due to anthropogenic contamination, as I mentioned, that we do have mining that is taking place, we do have construction that is taking place that is contaminating surface and groundwater, which we cannot utilize anymore. And of course, pathogens and toxins producing microorganisms also end up infiltrating the groundwater streams or systems, which then makes this water unusable for beer making, hence the actual preparation in beer making of our current generation. All right, so brewing water is purified prior to be used in brewing to ensure good meshing pH, hop extraction, kettle break, fermentation, and also it permits flavor and color development, and this happens in the finishing stages of your beer making. Remember what I said about this particular water that you utilize. You cannot just take water from the tap and use it. You cannot use distilled water, as you do need some of those particular components in the natural water as it is. Okay. And then we've got around about 15 minutes. I'm not sure if we can pause here to discuss the concepts that I've discussed. Any questions? Yes. All right. Remember what I said about the malt, right? These are seeds. If you can take a very close look at them, these are seeds. And again, they come from a barley plant. This is how the plant looks like. So these are harvested at a particular time as well. Remember, a plant have a lifespan as well. And then if you leave the plant for too long, it dies out, regardless of how much water you give it. So different plants have different lifespans. That's why they grow seasonally as well. So once the harvesting season has arrived, you need to harvest. And then as you harvest, you'll be getting this particular seeds, which will be part of your harvest. And from this serve as seeds. You can use this to replant the same plants again, or you can use this in your beer processes. Take it as corn. The sweet corn that you buy, the corn that you buy can either be used as milling meal to be milled to make maize meal, or you can use it to eat it as corn as it is, or you can also take the corn as it is to serve as seed to plant the seed to make more maize meal, right? So with this particular plant, you get these seeds, which you can either plant or you can utilize. So in beer making, what you are doing, you are allowing them to get into the initial stage of growth, which is the germinating step. And at that particular moment, remember, germination takes place at a different environment, normally in the soil where it is moist, which is the reason why you need to soak your barley and then put them in the dark in a moist environment. In that particular environment, they're going to start germinating. And as they're starting to germinate, there are enzymes that are being released from the seeds as a process of growth. And then as they start to grow, you don't want the plant part of the seeds, but only the enzymes that are explained, which are very important in your digestible sugars that will be available at that particular stage. And again, the second part of your question is if you leave it for too long. If you leave it for too long, you're then gonna start having more modifications or alteration of this particular seeds into the plant material. You do not need that to happen, because once you get to that stage, it will be even more challenging to harvest all those particular ingredients that you'll be requiring from the malt. Am I answering your question, ma'am? All right. Any other question? All right. If there's none, I'm gonna continue for the next coming 5 to 10 minutes and then stop so that you guys can take a break. Please watch the videos that I have uploaded. And then 11:25, we should come back again and convene in the respective meeting group and then finish off with the beer production. Right. So the wort is the liquid extracted from the mashing process. This is from the dry grains that we just explained to you guys, which happens after germination. And then the kilning. The kilning is when you stop the germination process, when you are roasting your grains at the temperature of around about 80 degrees, right? And then these are crushed through or between the rollers to make the fine powder. The fine powder is the yeast. And then this is the one that you're going to be using in your mashing. So mashing is the first step in the wort production. And then there's the soluble material that are extracted from the ground malt. The ground malt is the one that you get from grinding the malt, which is the yeast, right? So the objectives of mashing, this is done to dissolve the soluble ingredients. And of course, this is subjected to insoluble to enzymatic degradation. Part of your cereal or the grains that you're going to be having are insoluble products. However, in those insoluble products, you still need the enzymatic processes to break them down during mashing. And that's why the temperature in this particular stage is very important. So mashing takes place at around about 68 to not more than 80 degrees Celsius for around about an hour. You do not need to do it more than that. And again, based on how much you want to extract from your barley malts, you'll also be able to adjust the temperatures between 68 and 80. And as I said, not more than 80, because at more than 80, you want to start denaturing the enzymes that you need to extract this particular components from your grains, right? So this changes the chemical structure through simultaneous enzymatic actions in a planned or predictable manner. So we are predicting that the enzymes that are contained within this seed will be allowed to be active and then degrade the components as per the requirements of the process controller, which will be you if you are making the beer. All right. So variations in what and its compositions arises from enzyme complement contributed to the mash by the malt. Remember, mashing, most importantly, is the enzymes and the temperature. The mashing temperature, if it is off, you might not get your enzymes to work optimally. And then if it's too high, you are going to be denaturing your enzymes. And then the duration of mashing, it is quite important. As I said, you cannot carry out mashing more than an hour, right? So what contains simple sugars that are from your malt, polysaccharides, which are dextrins, amino acids, peptides, proteins, and other nitrogenous material that you are harvesting from the seeds, the vitamins, organic and inorganic phosphates, mineral salts, polyphenols, tannins, precursors, and the tannins. And of course, at the later stage, this needs to be removed. And then small quantities of lipids and many other compounds. All these are different components of this particular seeds that you want to be using in your beer making. All right. So what is unstable microbiologically, right? And when you say microbiologically, simply means they can be or they could be different microorganisms that are in your seed. Remember, these plant materials are harvested from the natural environment of a farm. And because of that, anything could be inhabiting the seeds, which is the reason why we say microbiologically they are unstable, because there could be more or different microorganisms. And of course, that makes it it's a very rich nutrient source. That's the reason why different microorganisms inhabit or make that particular environment a habitat for them. So this throws a heavy precipitate within it during the mashing and a variable amount of its constituents. Again, the microorganisms play a vital role, which is the reason why at the later stage you need to boil to a certain temperature to degrade or to kill all the different microorganisms that could be in your wort. And then surface active materials such as the lipids, hops, beta substance, and the proteins are removed. At this particular stage, you're going to be talking about the lutein, where you're going to be removing all the uncrushed or unseparated waste grain, and this will be removed with all these particular components. And then dissolution of starch yields greater part of the wort carbohydrates achieved by joint action of alpha and the beta amylase. The amylase is an enzyme that you do have in your mouth. And again, the plants also do have their own amylases, which can degrade different starch for them to start germinating. Remember, growth and microorganisms, they are interchangeably operated together during the growth of the growth of the plant. And again, because the plant was allowed to grow, during that growing process, you do have both the microorganisms and the plant enzymes in one particular component or environment, and which is the reason why you do have different amylases that have been produced by the plant. Okay. And then the meshing entails mixing. As I said, the meshing tin has the baffles that are turning throughout to mix your yeast and water. And then, of course, this to promote enzyme reactions, liquid-solid separations, elution and liquid-solid separations during the meshing process. And then post the enzymatic reactions, the liquid is separated from the grains, which will be having the spent grain. And the spent grain, it is full of nutrients still, even though we have removed the wort from it. This can be utilized to make your energy bars, can also be used to make the feed of the animals. And again, if you can check your jungle oats bar, that is normally made from spent grain from this particular processes. So there's two equipments used for wort separation, which is the lutein and the mesh filter. I did not include the pictures of those in this particular lecture, but then I can provide them at the later stage to show you how the lutein looks like. Inside there's a mesh or a metal net that removes all the unspent grains and then only allows liquid to pass through there. It's more like a filter that you have, which only allows the liquid and all the components that are dissolved in the liquid to pass through. All right. And then, of course, this particular step separate what from is collected, and then the water is collected, which is separated from the spent grain, and then it will be put into the kettle, and then in the kettle is where we're gonna be having the actual brewing, which is the boiling. Right. I think we should stop here. I've got 4 minutes, and then you can start from boiling process when you come back. Any question? Any questions? Are you guys still with me? All right. Any questions? Or is the process clear? Awesome. Thank you very much. So we're gonna continue from slide 32, and then I'll also be adding some of the slides to show you guys some of the components that I've just discussed, which I believe will be very interesting for you guys to see and to also understand how they work. And at the meantime, if you do have a free time before the next lecture, please watch the videos that I provided the links for, and then we can also discuss some of those concepts that are discussed in the videos at the later stage. And if there's no more questions, that's it from me until now. We'll meet again at 11:25. Thank you very much for your attention and your cooperation during this lecture. Thank you very much.